spend some time. All right. Really excited to spend some time with you all talking about something that is both fun, has been interesting to experience, and very, very eye-opening for me as a leader in higher education. So the way I'd like to format the presentation is please feel free. There'll be moments throughout the presentation where I'll take a break and just open it up for questions because there probably will be some things as we're going through that you want some clarity on, or you want to probe a little bit more about how I've managed this process. How I like to lead all presentations, I'm a big fan of making sure you walk away with something tangible. So as I go through the presentation, there's some strategies and tips that I'll be able to share that are tied directly to the conversation we're having this morning around the generational effect. So the first thing that I always like to do is just to provide a little context and let you all know who I am. My name is Jackie Thomas, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the chief strategist at Lone Star College Tomball. So I work in Tomball, Texas, but live in Houston, Texas. Tomball is a few miles north of Houston, and we are part of the Lone Star College system, which services about 85 to 90,000 students across North Houston. In my role as chief strategist, I get a chance to lead really five major areas at the college. So our college relations department, so marketing communication is within our division. Our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which houses our Center for Leadership, Academic, and Student Success. Our Multimedia Services Department, which is all things media and instructional technology. Our Professional Development Department, which is faculty, staff development, culture work. And then finally, our Department of Strategy and Innovation, which includes strategic planning, institutional effectiveness, research, grants, fundraising, community engagement. So it's an amazing job that's aligned with my strengths, and feel really, really fortunate to work in this capacity at Lone Star College. So my career trajectory is really unique in that I started in higher ed. I wouldn't say unique, but unique to the community college. And I started as a residential life and housing person. So I worked in student retention programs for 3 years, building a residentially based retention program at a large diverse university in Houston, at the University of Houston. Did that for a few years. Worked in kind of your traditional residential life and housing role as an area coordinator for a little bit. And then I found my way to the community college as a faculty member and taught our learning frameworks class. Some people refer to it as EDUC 1300 or Psych 1301. I mean, it's got a number of different names, but was able to teach that class full time for 3 years. Moved into an assistant dean role, which was my first time supervising full-time professionals, and did that for about 10 months. Was asked to serve as our interim executive director of college relations, did that for 10 months, and then was blessed to be able to work with our college president to create the role that I'm in now. I share all of that though, because as I was navigating my career, I found myself having to lead people who kind of fell into different generations. And it just taught me a lot about myself, who I want to be as a leader, and then really help refine some tips and strategies that have helped me along the way as I've led teams. So let's get right into it. Again, I'll pause periodically to see if you all have any questions. But the first slide is really about our workforce, right? And recognizing that the workforce is changing. So if you see here in 1994, 21% of our workforce was made up of the silent generation. I'll explain that generation a little bit. 50% was made up of baby boomers, and 29% of our workforce in 1994 was made up of Generation Xers. So fast forward into 2017, you're seeing a huge shift in how our workforce looks. So 2% of that workforce now is made up of the silent generation, 25% baby boomers, 33% Gen Xers, 35% millennials, and then Gen Zers are popping up at 5%. So we've gone from a workforce that is made up of 3 different generations to one that now spans across 5 different generations, which provides for a really robust but also unique work experience, because you're learning from people who've got a variety of different lived experiences. So what we know about these generations is that they have a different set of values. They come to us with a different set of ideas. They have a different outlook on the way in which things get done, particularly at work. And then finally, they have different ways of communicating, right? So I'll talk a little bit about communication later, right? But the image here is just a cell phone, right? And I remember, the value of picking up the phone and calling somebody, or how quickly we're now evolved to web technology and how we're engaging with people. So we definitely see how we all communicate differently. So I want to park here for a little bit and just give you a chance to take a look at this slide. And I won't read through these all verbatim, but um, here is some, in my opinion, some pretty relevant characteristics of these 5 generations. So the silent or traditional generation is anybody from, pre to 1945. Our baby boomers fall into the years of 1946 to 1960. Gen X, 1961 to 1980. Our millennials, 1981 and 95, and then our Generation Z, it should be 1996 to present. And you'll hear when people do presentations around different generations, those years will fluctuate, but for the sake of this presentation, those are the years that we're going to use. And I just want to give you a moment to kind of look at the descriptors, and then I'll talk through a few that really stand out for me. All right, so let's start, right? So initially you see just a kind of a general descriptor of each of these groups. Your silent generation is really described as being disciplined, whereas our baby boomers are experimental or innovators and are hard workers. You see our Gen X, this idea of independence and being free agents of their life. Millennials, very confident, wanting things immediately, and really, really appreciating and seeing the value of diversity. And then our Gen Z group being very optimistic with high expectations. I think as I'm looking at some of these areas, the ones that really stand out to me in my role, specifically around their attitude about the career. So, right, you've got a group of folks in the workforce who see jobs as you get a job and you stick with this thing for life. And then you have another member of this kind of workforce who is, um, I'm loyal to the profession, but not the employer, to others who are very quick to move in between and in and out different jobs for opportunities, or they may get bored a lot easily. When you look at the communication preferences of our generation, so we're going from like people who see and value formal letters and writing notes to baby boomers who appreciate a phone call or want to have a face-to-face conversation, where our Gen Xers are quick to email and send text messages. Our millennials very much use text and social media. And then, right, we're dealing with generations now who are utilizing handheld devices and wearables and FaceTime, and are experiencing tools like WebEx Teams as a mechanism for how they're engaging with each other. So I have a longer list of generational characteristics that I will share with everybody when the presentation is done, but just pulled out a few that I thought were really important, especially as we're talking about the workforce. As we look at their attitude towards technology, you've got folks who don't want anything to do with technology, those who are digital natives, so are used to it, and then folks who are technoholics, who live and die by their technology. And then we'll talk about this kind of newest generation, Generation Alpha, who technology is all that they've known. They are coming up into a world where technology isn't a tool, but something that is integrated into their lives. So let me just stop here and see if y'all have any questions about these generational characteristics. You can type them in the chat. I don't know if you're able to actually speak, but if you have questions here, I'll pause and make space for those. All right. So in addition to these kind of 5 major generations, you also have, and this is where I kind of see myself fitting in, you have a group called Cuspers. Some people call these micro generations. The group that I'm going to speak to now is a group referred to as a Zennial, so kind of the hybrid between Gen X and Millennial. And all of this is my lived experience, and some of you on the call may relate to this as well. So you're looking at generations that fall kind of in between some of these generations. So going back to this slide, there's a micro generation that exists between the silent generation and baby boomers, right? So those folks that were either born like 1945, 1946, they straddle the line between the two, and their lived experience is straddling the line between both of those. So as I think about my own experience, these descriptors of the Zennial population, this group teetering between Gen X and millennials, very much me. So this is a micro generation born during the cusp years of Gen X and millennials. So this range here is between 1977 and 83. So I love this description here, right? That Zennials experience an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. So I remember this term, a latchkey kid, right? So I was very, very independent kind of as a small child. And then as I got older, right, started to recognize the value of like codependence and building relationships with others. I remember like we had a Betamax in my house growing up. I remember having like it was like pre-CD, so you could watch movies on like this big disc. I forgot
Was
what it
that
was called.
laser disc? I had one
The
of those with
laser
the boys.
disc, right? Um, but then I also remember my mom and dad like getting our first cell phone, which was like the big box that you plugged into the lighter, right? So again, kind of hiding, teetering the line, this analog childhood, and then moving into this digital adulthood, where now I am on Twitter, I am on social media. I am, I've got an Apple Watch, so I've kind of migrated kind of both parts of this these generational linkages. So we have this Gen X cynicism and this millennial optimism and drive, which I think is very much true. And then this box to the right, signs you're a Zennial. So you played Oregon Trail growing up. You used dial-up internet. So I remember getting like the AOL.com CD in the mail that would give you like free dial-up internet time. You grew up with social media. You made mixtapes, so you were listening to the radio and either recording songs on the radio. You didn't have a cell phone until college, so my first cell phone was owned by VoiceStream, now I think T-Mobile, and then using a Discman. So this can be replicated across other generations, but recognizing that these micro generations do exist and bring a unique set of skills and experiences to the workplace as well. And absolutely, Cheryl, and that's a great point. You do have to be very diverse in your mindset when you're working with multi-generations. And I'll talk about some tips and strategies to help navigate that in a moment. So I do want to bring up Generation Alpha. So I have 2 small children, a daughter that is 6 and a son that is 3, who both own digital devices, who are my daughter knows how to say, "Hey Siri." My kids know how to search the internet. So this Generation Alpha, is anyone born after 2010 who in some cases can barely walk, but are already set to be the most transformative generation yet, right? So I mentioned this earlier. It's not that they've grown up with technology, but they've been completely immersed in it since birth. So, I shared my daughter's confidence in her ability to speak in to voice assistants. My son can swipe and unlock my phone or my wife's phone. He is 3 years old. And they don't really see technology as a resource, but more it is something that surrounds them and is a part of their day-to-day life. So it'll be very interesting to see as this generation grows up and enters the workforce in 10, 15 years, how they are bringing a different set of skills, experiences to the workforce that will change the way in which we engage with each other. Excuse me. So let's talk about the workplace in each of these different 5 kind of major generational groups that are in the workplace. So you've got your traditionalists who, when you see them in the workforce, they're very much loyal to their employers and expect loyalty in return. So they believe that promotions, raises, and recognition should come from job tenure. So I've been here the longest, so that is the reason why I should get the promotion versus the new person who may have come in, only worked for a short period of time, but possesses a certain set of skills that make them more competitive for an opportunity. And work ethic to our traditionalists or our silent generation is really tied to timeliness, productivity, and they don't want attention to come to them. When we look at our baby boomers, their work ethic is measured in hours worked, right? So I spent a significant amount of time at work. That shows you my commitment to the job or to the role. They have less importance placed on productivity, but really see relationship building, teamwork as critical to the success of how they work. And they expect loyalty from those they work with. And I'll speak to some of my professional experience tied to these different generations. So Gen X, so they prefer kind of a casual, friendly work environment. They want flexibility, freedom, recognizing that work is a place to learn. Exist around this idea that you want to work smarter, not harder. So that is something that I believe in as a Xennial, a cusper. So Gen Xers want open communication, regardless of position, title, or tenure, and they want to be able to value control of their time. Right now, I'm always careful to say, these are sweeping generalizations, but good characteristics to take on as you're working with folks in different generations. So our millennials. So this group wants open, constant communication and feedback from their boss. And I can, again, my professional experience is that I want to make sure that I am doing my job as it's aligned with my president's vision and her goals. I need a job that is that provides fulfillment, right? So millennials want a job that provides great personal fulfillment. Millennials want leadership from their bosses and supervisors. They want to learn, similar to all of our other generations. But they have this philosophy that they are working to live rather than living to work. And then last but certainly not least, are Gen Zs. So these folks are very collaborative and creative in the work environments. They're going to bring a lot of new ideas, more self-directed, so may not necessarily feel like they need to be given direction, although they may need it. They process information very, very quickly, right? They've been used to getting things in quicker. And then they're smart, right? So they have had access to a lot of information. I remember growing up, and if I needed to look something up, I had to look through the encyclopedia. And if it wasn't in the encyclopedia, I would have to trust the advice and feedback from my parents, where Gen Z has been able to get access to information at a quick speed and a variety of information over time. So as you can see here, just kind of based on the values they hold on their work at work, the way in which they work, how they want to be communicated. There's a variety of differences across the 5 generations that are currently in our workplace. All right, so why do I talk about this? It's because my team is multi-generational. So I have 2 folks who would consider to be Xennial, so T to the line between Gen X and Millennial. 2 Millennials, 2 Gen Xers, and a baby boomer. So this is my immediate leadership team that I am so fortunate to be able to work with. So it has been critical for me to identify what works well and how can I engage them in a way that they feel like I respect them, I respect their contributions, that I am pulling on their strengths, and I'm using all of their talents to ensure that we are the most productive team that we can be. So before I go into the next slide, any questions that I need to be able to answer, points of clarification? All right, I'll keep checking the chat, seeing none. All right, so as I As I lead this team, there's just some things that I have to remind myself, right? As I go to work every day and as I evaluate the work that we've got to get done, projects, initiatives, um, emphasizing the value in building a high performing team. There are things that I have to remind myself. And the first is that I'm the leader, not the expert. And there are individuals on my team who are subject matter experts in their area. And I need to trust that, um, I tell them all the time, I hire you because I need you to know more about this than I do. You are the resident expert. And for me, I think that has made people, feel valued, and it allows them to know that their opinion is valued, their experiences are valuable, and I appreciate um, what they bring to the team, right? So then my job is to lead this group, not to be the expert at everything. The next is I believe that there are a variety of different leadership philosophies out there. Some people are going to say that they're a transformational leader, or I'm a democratic leader, or I'm a strategic leader, or I'm a transactional leader. I believe very, very strongly in this idea of situational leadership. And it is because situational leadership is tied to choosing the right leadership style for the right person, right? So to me, it's like the epitome of the platinum rule, right? So it's treat others how they want to be treated, not treat other people how you want to be treated, right? How we've been accustomed to think about it around the golden rule, right? But this platinum rule is you tweak your style to how a person wants to be led. So I just want to share some benefits of situational leadership. So the first is it accelerates the pace and the quality of employee development because you are not doing this holistic package professional development. You are asking your individual folks what they want and need to be their best selves. Situational leadership allows leaders to effectively drive behavior change because, again, right, you are addressing that individual person. You've built that relationship, and you've probably had conversations about how that person wants to grow and ways in which they may want to change who they are and how they show up at work. So situational leadership teaches leaders to accurately interpret and effectively respond to their environment. So it just makes you so much more aware of the people you are working with, the things that are happening in your area, because you're so much more in tune. And I'll give you a quick example. I know little to nothing about multimedia services. But the amount of time that I spend with our manager of multimedia services and learning about video and virtual reality and augmented reality, it just makes me so much more aware about how his area and his work can impact the entire college and the way in which we do our work. A situational leadership allows the leader to know when to be consistent and flexible and to influence up, down, and across the organization. So there are times where I've had conversation with folks on my team and recognize that we need to find a way to have our staff members and our part-time employees, our adjunct faculty, to have their voices be heard, and to allow them to drive decisions and to help us make change at their level. And that only happens when you're in tune to what's going on in your area and having those relationships with the folks on your team. And then finally, situational leadership allows you to develop engaged and committed staff by recognizing and addressing performance dynamics. And I'll talk a little bit about strengths-based leadership in a moment. So some things to consider as you are looking at or are engaging in situational leadership, right? It's important that there's a strong relationship between the leader and the team, that you really have to think about as you are engaging with the folks on your team. How do their skills align with the tasks, the projects, and initiatives that are coming from your area or you are being charged with accomplishing? I think it's important to recognize the level of authority and influence of a leader. So, I am fortunate to say that I have built up a lot of leadership capital at Lone Star College, particularly at our Tomball campus, and that allows me to help the folks on my team navigate situations a lot easier or a lot quicker because of that leadership capital, and that may not always be the case. The next two really are kind of tied, right? When we talk about generational differences, obviously that's kind of connected to age. Maturity doesn't necessarily always have to be tied to age, but nonetheless, Things to think about is a level of maturity of your employees and your leader, especially as you're divvying up responsibilities or sharing information. And then finally, right, the point of this presentation is tied to generational differences. So things to think about as you engage in situational leadership. So going back to this first slide, again, reminding myself that I'm not the leader, that I am the leader, not the expert, recognizing the power of situational leadership. I have to remind myself to communicate often and across multiple platforms. And this pandemic has been a game changer just in terms of how we have to expand the way in which we communicate. So not only am I having WebEx Teams meetings, I'm also communicating through WebEx chat. I am also utilizing social media to engage with students and staff. I am still calling people. I'm a huge proponent of picking up the phone and giving folks a call. Obviously, email is important, but you've got all these different channels of communication. And tying back to what I shared earlier about our different kind of generations, people still appreciate the fact that you've given them a call or, you know, written somebody a note. So I've got an employee who loves handwritten notes. So I've had to, I'm not a writer, but that is the way in which that person prefers to be communicated. So I write notes. So what I found is that it's imperative that I be able to communicate across all these platforms, right? I'm still learning like the shorthand with text messaging, but I've got folks on my team who I can get to them quicker through a text than I can through the response of an email. And it's just because of how immediate they are checking their phone. So important for us to recognize. The next is to be careful about language and word choice, right? Because, you know, when you talk about generations, you obviously are connecting that to folks' age. And I try to be very careful about how I say things in meetings or in general in our communication with each other, because I've had, oh goodness, my experience has being somebody who would consider myself to be relatively young. I feel like I'm reminded that weekly, whether it is because, oh my gosh, you remind me of my son, or you don't, oh, you weren't born when this happened, right? Kind of small comments that I've kind of learned to brush off, but could bother somebody, especially as they think about how they exist in a team and how their age may be seen as a contribution or to a detriment to an organization. So just want to make sure that you want to be careful and reminding yourself to be careful about language and word choice. Or like, this young fella right here, like, yeah, I'm not that young. I mean, my son's young. At any rate, just be careful about that, because some people may see that as a slight to their ability and how they contribute. Practicing emotional intelligence. So I have to remind myself that people are looking to me for my leadership, and there are moments where I've got a million and one things going on, but I recognize that one of my employees needs my undivided attention. So just I try to pride myself on being as self-aware as possible. And obviously that takes work, but being able to recognize your emotions, recognize other people's emotions, and respond appropriately is so critical when you're dealing with a variety of different generations in the workplace. And then this one's probably my favorite, right? Is about asking really, really good questions. So this week I try to schedule, and again, it's really dependent on the person, right? It's my baby boomers fine with meeting once a month. I've got millennials who want to meet every other week, which is fine, right? Because they want to get feedback and they want to know how they're doing, which again, I'm completely okay with. So in those meetings, and as you're building a team and working with a multi-generational team, I think it's important to ask these questions, right? So how can I best supervise you? And that's actually a question that I ask when I am checking references from a previous employer. So what tips would you give me on how I can best supervise this person? But asking somebody directly, how can I best supervise you? What do you need to be the best you at work, right? What are your most important work values? I feel like I would love for us to do a better job in higher education of speaking to the importance of work values, right? So I was having a conversation with my supervisor yesterday and shared with her, you know, the thing that I appreciated most about her is that she addresses the things that I value so much at work: freedom, autonomy, the ability to be creative, and trust. And if all four of those were gone, I would have to leave. But it is because that I'm aware of them and that I've had a conversation with her that these are the things that I value, that she can create an environment that's conducive to those values. And if she can't because it doesn't match her style or there are other things that may prevent that, I think it's important to have the conversation about where can you go that you're going to find a place that's going to meet those things that are important to you. And the last two are, what do you want to work on? I think it's very easy to get into the rhythm of a job and not give people that opportunity to feel like they can be creative, they can introduce something new that shows that for them shows their value to the team. So I always want to know, what do you want to work on? And then collectively as a group, what do we need to function as a high performing team? Any any presentation, excuse me, that I do, I speak so much about how building a high performing team is so critical to who I am. Like that is something that you know, there's a really good book called Super Bosses, and it's one of the kind of fundamental principles of that book, kind of connected to First Break All the Rules, is another good book. Is this idea that you got to be okay with having somebody who's really great for a short period of time and then sending them on somewhere else. Because and you'll hear different philosophies, but I will tell you, I would rather have a workhorse for 2 years than somebody that's going to pace their work out for 10. So if you can come and kill it for me in 2 years and do 10 years worth of work in two, and I've set you up to be successful to move on to your next role, I'm okay with that, right? And all of that is built around my want and need to build this very strong, high performing, high functioning team. And that is the response to that question is from everybody. It's, what do we need collectively as a group? This multi-generational team with a variety of talents, interests, skills, lived experiences. How can we use all of that to make us this team that is respectful, that is driven, that is motivated, and is designing work to make sure that we're helping students, faculty, staff, and our community be successful. So let me stop here and see if you all have any questions before I get into my tips and my strategies. Katrina, so great question. How do you, as an employee, handle a boss or a leader who does not assist with your development as a leader? So I don't want to, I've got something for you in a slide coming up. So let's hold that, and I'll give you a tip that you would hope your boss would help you with, but what you could use to best support yourself. And I will tell you, my supervisor is amazing. Um, but I find myself, and I think she would admit to this, I find myself driving my own professional development. Now, I'm not able to do that without her support. So she is very supportive. But in terms of the pathways that I need to take, um, that's driven by me. You all may have heard Ricky Shabazz present. He and I and Roosevelt spoke um, on Monday or Tuesday. He did a presentation yesterday. So Ricky Shabazz is my mentor, kind of assigned through the Lakin Institute, but as somebody who has really stepped in and been critical in my growth and development as a professional. So he and I, we've not done this recently just because of the pandemic, but he and I would meet like at least once a month and give me feedback. So in short, Katrina, I think there are other ways that you can get the professional development that you need, whether it's through a mentor, whether it's through a collection of colleagues who are all rallied behind pushing yourselves to get better, or through a tool that I'm going to share with you in a moment. Great question. So let's talk about my 5 tips. I'm very careful about, I don't want, some people do like 10 or 12. I want to make sure that I can get through this presentation, open the floor for questions, because I think you may want to pull some information from me about some of these tips that I'm going to share. So here are my 5 tips that I would share with leading a multi-generational team. So the first is the importance of focusing on strength. So I mentioned that when I talked about situational leadership. I'm going to make the assumption that many of you have heard about Strengths Finder and the Strengths Assessment. So I am just a huge believer in the power of positive psychology and utilizing individual strengths to move them forward and move themselves forward. Now, that does not take away from the fact that I still do have conversations about opportunities for growth and development. But the first thing that I found, right, something that's consistent across the board is that everybody brings a set of strengths that can help our team be successful. And here's what I use to ensure that this is front and center. So for those of you who may not be familiar with strengths, you take an assessment, you get 34 themes of talent based on this really quick response of questions through an assessment that Clifton Strengths Finder offers. There are 4 domains of team strength. So the first you see is executing. So people with this executing strength, they're about making stuff happen. Whereas our influencing folks know how to take charge, speak up, they make sure that people are heard. Our relationship building folks are exactly that, right? They're the ones that are going to hold the team together and make the team great. And then our strategic thinkers are going to help analyze information, make us make better decisions, and think through how we're going to proceed. So on my desk and tacked to my wall, this is my entire leadership team. So that is inclusive of my administrative support lead, and then all of my direct reports, and then obviously myself. So I use this in a number of different ways, right? So one of them is how am I believe so hard, strongly in team development and team building. Kentry Ledee has 3 themes, and the colors aren't aligned here, but the kind of light blue you see on my sheet is tied to relationship building. So Kentry and Wendy are my relationship builders. So they are the ones that plan our staff retreat, or they are the ones that make sure that during our all staff meetings that we're giving focused recognition to people who have done great things. Whereas if I need somebody, we had a meeting yesterday, and Jeremy, our director of diversity and inclusion, is at the stage of his diversity action plan where he is asking somebody to give feedback. Well, the person that I'm going to say, Jeremy, you make sure that they give you feedback, is Jennifer, because of her intellection, the fact that she's very deliberative and responsible, and she puts things in context. So for me, it is taking strengths to another level, and I'm very intentional in how I use their strengths to contribute to the work that we've got to do to build a team, but also the work that we are doing external to the college. So I cannot, their strengths are their strengths, right? And in their job. So Kentry is our director of professional development. So it helps that she is a learner, that one of her strengths is intellection, that she's able to build relationships with people, and she's a strong communicator. But there's still also collateral assignments that aren't attached to their work that I look at strengths and say, all right, you know what? We are getting ready to build a department or division-wide strategic plan. And the person internally that I need to help lead that is Danielle, because she's strategic, she's responsible with the work, she's about getting it done, and she receives feedback well, right? So for me, focusing on strengths is so critical because it allows us to see how each of us contribute to make our team strong. And it helps me as a leader identify opportunities that I can capitalize on their talents and that they're able to shine and grow in their roles. So focusing on strengths. The next is pace and accountability. So when I shared one of the slides earlier about the description of the different generations, it described kind of how they work, right? Some folks like to take their time and make sure that what they're doing is done correctly. Whereas you've got other generations who are like, look, let's get it done. Let's move quickly so I can move on to the next project. So for me, it's so important that I find a way to manage the pace, but also hold people accountable. And there is a really awesome book called Scrum: The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And I want to say that this is actually a book that I remember one of the presidents during the Lakin Institute recommend. So I got it and I read it and I pulled out this idea of sprints that I want to share with you all because it has completely changed the way in which our division works, from our leadership team all the way down to staff. So basically, sprints are the short bursts of focused attention on a particular project or initiative that individuals will take to get something done. And I really use it in two ways, right? I tell my team all the time, look, y'all, this year there were 13 major things that we wanted to accomplish, and we got 10 of those 13. What can we do to make sure that we are 13 out of 13? And a lot of it goes back to, what, we just didn't have enough time, or I focused on 1 through 10, and then 11, 12, and 13 just kind of slipped through the cracks, or maybe something changed. And that's all of us. That's me included. So the first way in which I used sprints was, let's use sprints as a way to get 11, 12, and 13 done. So again, it's a short burst of energy. So in short, without boring you with the description, essentially a sprint is, you take a project or initiative that you want to focus 4 to 6 weeks worth of energy and attention on, and you laser focus on that. So let's say that, one of the things that we're working on right now is building a crisis management plan. So if that is a responsibility that Jackie assumes as part of our leadership team, or maybe me and Danielle and Kenstra are working on this, we've got 4 to 6 weeks to give undivided attention to that project. On the 6th week, you are then responsible for presenting to our entire leadership team what you've been able to accomplish in the form of like visuals and artifacts and documents. So at the end of 6 weeks, we'll come back and say, all right, you all, this is what we've sprinted. We've built out the website for our crisis management plan. We've identified who's going to be on the team. They've all confirmed that they're going to be on the team. We've put together the first 5 chapters of our crisis management plan, our document, and then they're sharing all of this. And then we as a leadership team are able to give them feedback. So the graphic looks amazing. I think the website's great, but you should add this. And they're either able to roll that into another sprint, or they wrap the project up. So I share this with you all because it has put us all on this kind of level playing field. And the thing that's beautiful about sprints is that everybody is working on either a sprint they're sharing or their own individual sprint. So we're sprinting things simultaneously. And then at the end of 6 weeks, we have like a 3-hour meeting. We're all sharing what we've been able to accomplish around that sprint. And the power and the energy and the synergy in that room is just amazing. And it's created this way in which we work now where, excuse me, if there's something that we want to get done really quickly, we'll sprint it. Or if there is a project that we like to get done over a longer period of time, we break it up into 4 or 5 sprint cycles. So it just is an amazing tool. And if you want to talk more about how we implement it offline, I can, but the book talks a lot about how Scrum and sprints work, but it has been an amazing tool to help us pace each other and hold each other accountable to the work. So the third point is really about finding ways to connect with each other and the work, right? Because, going back to, we all bring a different set of lived experiences, skills, and it's very easy to get caught up in your own respective space and doing your work and not having time to connect with your colleague, especially if you're not physically located. So our entire division is not housed in the same area. We're spread all throughout the college. So how do we find ways to make sure that we're connecting with each other as a team and with our work? And how we do that is really around goals and collaboration. So we do an annual summer retreat where we reflect on the goals that we set from the year previous, and then everybody on our leadership team will bring, based on feedback from their teams, a set of goals, targets, and priorities that we want to work on. And we use time during our retreat or during a follow-up staff meeting to have everybody talk through, here are the goals that I'd like to set and accomplish this year. And then we start figuring out how they match up, right? Or where are there opportunities for collaboration. So what you see here is the dry erase board that is in front of my, is in my office that I'm actually facing right now. And anytime that I want to launch something new, I put it through a design thinking process. So we start with ideation, just the idea. We spend some time exploring the idea, going to the second step. Selection is where we decide, all right, this is what we're going to do. And then you go through design, implementation, evaluation, and then scale. So right now you can just see a set of initiatives that we've got going on in our division and where they fall within this particular design thinking process. And you'll see selection, design, implement, evaluate, scale all fall in the sprint cycle that I talked about in the previous slide. But what I really want to focus your energy on, or your attention on rather, is the documents you see at the bottom, which is a collaborative project that myself, our director of professional development, our director of marketing, and our administrative specialist is working on. And it is putting together a new employee onboarding program. So we are all through one way or another and having our conversation about goals that we've set, all kind of landed on how can we in our respective areas create this experience that when our employees, we hire a new employee, that we appropriately onboard them, right? So that there is pre-reading, there is a guide for supervisors, that we've got a custom agenda that a new employee will follow that will ensure that they are successful in their first 90 days, that we do an employee insight questionnaire to find out answers to some of the questions that I shared earlier, right? Where do you see yourself, or how can I help you become better? What are your work values? All the way into our new employee culture orientation. We have them do a professional development plan. They do a strengths consultation. So have a one-on-one meeting with one of our strengths coaches, and then we put them through additional professional development. So I share that again because that is an example of how we've taken ideas from a retreat, looked at goals, targets, and priorities from each of our areas, and then aligned them in a way in which you've got these teams, collaborative teams that are working together to accomplish a goal that not only impacts our division, but also supports the college. So let me stop here and see if you've got any questions about kind of the first three slides. First is about focusing on strengths. The second is about kind of the sprint process and how we're kind of pacing out our work and holding people accountable. And then the third is about how we use retreats and then a goal alignment to identify initiatives that we can all collaborate on as a division. All right, so the last is invest in their development. So Katrina, here is the slide that I was talking about. So I am a huge, proponent of employee growth and development. And that manifests in two ways at our college. And, it goes back to recognizing that some people just want to learn more about how to do well in your job, right? So my baby boomers like, look, I just want to do my job really well. Whereas my Gen Xers and some of my millennials are like, look, I just want to learn more about the field or how I can grow as a professional so I can move on to my next job, right? So I use this professional development plan to serve two purposes. One is for those who are like, look, I just want to grow and get better at my job, which is great because everybody doesn't want to be a dean or a vice president or a president. Some people value stability. So knowing that, two things that I have the folks on my staff do. The first is I have them, we have built, and if you've heard me talk about this in other areas, it'll be a good refresher. If you've not, I asked our director of professional development to build out guides for employees based on the American Association of Community Colleges competencies for community college leaders. So they more recently released a third edition. So now you've got a guide that you can download, and I'll send you all a link where you have access to that on our website. And let me see if I can kind of pull out really quickly to give you a quick snapshot of what that looks like. So So here is, you should be able to, you should be seeing a guide right now. So it's really like a workbook where you are evaluating yourself based on the competencies that AACC has said they are looking for in mid-level leaders. So you'll see here, you know, how do you evaluate yourself on your ability or your experience about learning about the college's mission, vision, and values. So maybe you say, I am proficient. Then you have an opportunity to talk, to list experiences. So I worked on the system office 2020 or 2025 strategic plan. And you can do this throughout the, and it's whatever you want to list throughout this entire document. All right. So that's the first thing. So I ask employees to fill this out once and then revisit it to see if there are things that have changed over the year. Now, if there's an area that you feel like an opportunity for growth, so that is where the PD plan comes in. So you can either, so here, let me get to a bigger kind of version of the PD plan. So you all should be able to see just kind of the first slide or the first page of the plan, which is they are able to do two or three different options. One is you're going to take a focus area from the AACC competencies and say, here is what I want to work on. So the example that I provided is around fundraising. Like, I want to learn more about fundraising. So you pick the competency, how it's relevant to your role, your skill level, the development opportunity. So you want to learn more about grant development, the time frame, and then your evidence of completion and success. The second page of this document is, so what are you going to do? So activities. So it, you know, the example here is, because I want to learn more about fundraising, I'm going to join the Grants Council. And then it gives information about where it is. And this could be a conference, this could be an institute, but it is a way for us to have a conversation every year about either opportunities for growth or spaces that will allow you to refine your skills in a particular area. So let me stop here and see if you have questions about the PD plan. I see there's something in the chat, but I can't see it, Caesar. Like, it's not allowing me to pull up the chat. All right, well, we'll keep going. All right, so last but certainly not least is this idea of visualizing their success and contributions. So I recognize that I've got folks who want to be recognized for their work, who don't want to be recognized for their work, who want to be recognized often for their work. So you know, without trying to, you know, kind of going back to this situational leadership and supporting people in the way in which they want to be supported. There's a tool that I use that allows everybody to see the work. Enrico, I'll send you all a link to the AACC competencies guides that are on our website. And then if you give me your email, I will send over the professional development plan as well. Great question. So what I have found is that there is a technology tool called Trello. It is like a visual dashboard that has been a game changer for our team. And it is essentially a project, a visual project management tracker that allows everybody to see what everybody else is working on. And it's not even there's really no competition tied to it other than seeing the work that your colleagues are doing, who's collaborating on what project, and then how you all are moving projects from in progress to completion. So what you see here is just an example of, and you know, I am a huge proponent of holding myself accountable. So this is what I call our OSI general / collaboration Trello board. And again, Trello is just a online technology tool that helps you collect information from multiple sources and put it in one space. So throughout this design, you can see You know, there are projects that I am working on with multiple people on my team, whether it's this Creative Spaces website. We've got an endowment goal that we have met. So we've raised over $408,000, and that was collaboratively done between myself, Danielle, and Maggie. So you've got this visual dashboard based on area. So here's the work coming out of our Center for Leadership, Academic, and Student Success. You see work coming out of College Relations. You see work out of COAT. And it's just great to be able to, we do like a all Trello meeting once a month tied to sprints, where you're just able to sit back and like say, whoa, you know, Danielle, I am so proud of the work that you all have been able to do in College Relations. Over the past 3 months, you have rebranded the entire college, come up with a new way to market and promote our 8-week classes. Kentry, Maggie, Danielle, great job on the work you've done around raising money for our endowment. It just is a great way to track the work. And it also ties into our ways of holding folks accountable, right? So as I think about how the folks on my team want to be recognized in different ways, this tool has worked really well, and holding us accountable and having something visual that people can see and use. So I see a question: if you do not get formally evaluated, how would one work with their supervisor to work on and monitor professional development? That's a great question. I would schedule a standing meeting, and to be very honest, I would download the guide and the PD plan. So I would say, you know, one of the things that's important to me, and I had to do that with my boss. So my president is so busy that I've got to make sure that I have time on my calendar. So when her and I first met, she said, so how often do you want to meet? No, I asked her, how often do you want to meet? She's like, oh, we can just meet when we need to. And I was like, nope, we're going to meet once a month. I went to her admin. I was like, Jackie, I need one meeting a month. And then I set the agenda. So here are the things that I want to talk about. And over time, right, it's become this collaborative experience between her and I. But I would definitely recommend scheduling standing meetings, how often you want, monthly, bi-weekly, and then taking the lead, taking the initiative, filling out the guide, filling out the PD plan, and saying, hey, listen, I was made aware of this tool that's aligned with AACC's competencies for leaders. And I just took the time to evaluate myself, and I need your help in helping me accomplish these particular goals, right? All right, folks. So just to wrap up, so my 5 tips: focus on their strengths. Make sure that you create a mechanism for pace and accountability, because across generations, people are going to work differently and at different paces. You want to find ways to make sure you connect with each other in the work, especially if you're not physically located in the same space. And it gives, you know, again, folks an opportunity to pull in prior experiences that will help you get your work done better, more efficient, and it's just a more robust product. Invest in their development. So going back to situational leadership, recognizing that each person is going to want and need, and tying it back to generations, is going to want and need professional development differently. Some are going to want to be prepared for their next job. Others are going to want to prepare to do better in their current role. But showing them that you care about their development and that you're intentional about that is important. And then finally coming up with a mechanism to really visualize their success and their contributions. And that could be using a tool like Trello. That could be doing a annual employee awards banquet, or whatever you want to do to recognize the work that your folks have done and their contribution to the team, so that everybody is addressed and felt like they are appreciated, and their work has been valued. All right, you all. So I'm going to stop here. I think we've got about 10 minutes. I see some email addresses coming through, so I'll make sure to download those, and I'll send over a link to the guides there. It's easier to just download them from our Lone Star College website. And as a matter of fact, let me, I can grab that for you right now and paste it into the chat. And then for those of you who want the PD plan, I will take your emails and send those over. But any questions that you all have that I can address as it relates to leading the different generations in the workplace, and more specifically leading a multi-generational team. So I feel like one of my responsibilities is to make sure to give away shirts for people that have asked questions, but I get the sense that we've gotten 5 questions throughout the presentation. So I will go in and grab folks who have who've asked questions, and work with Ricky to send over t-shirts and t-shirt sizes. But any other pressing questions that I could answer? And Caesar, I'm having a hard time. I don't know if you can see, I have like 3 little bubbles in the Q&A chat, but I cannot see them. Like I keep clicking on the box and nothing's
okay. Let's see, we have 3 items here. You balance the team with clear distinctions among how they value people, product, and process.
I'm sorry, can you just type those into the chat?
So,
Okay, great question. So how do you balance a team with clear distinctions among how they value people, product, and process? That's a great question. So in terms of people, so we have a general set of core values that we set as a college and as a division. And for me, the most important thing is how are our areas aligning to the values that we've set as a department and as an institution. However, you know, I trust that I allow people to, you know, I want you to be able to lead your team the way that you lead. And I will let you do that in the event that I hear that there's a problem or people are treated inappropriately. That's something that we have to address. But in terms of how you know, I expect Danielle to lead college relations, and Danielle and Jennifer to lead college relations the way that they see fit. I expect Kensha to lead her team the way that she sees fit, as long as it is aligned with the values and expectations we've connected as a team. In terms of product and process, so I have very, very high expectations about product. So people know that in our division, if you're going to put something out, it is going to be to the highest level of, I wouldn't even say perfection. I'm very much okay with mistakes, but that you have put forth a product that you would be proud of, that I would be proud of, and the president would be proud of. And then in terms of process, so I shared with you all kind of the sprints, and we use Trello as a mechanism to track and manage our work. But that does not necessarily have to trickle down to how they lead their areas. Like I've got several teams who use Trello as a way in which they manage their work, and have others that use other mechanisms. How I lead and what works best for me is what I share with you all, but the expectation is that they all use what's going to work best for them. Eric, I hope that answers your question. And we have a really unique team. They, as I shared earlier, they come from, I've got boomers, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, some are introverts, some are extroverts. You saw that their strengths are different. And I celebrate, you know, it's kind of like the conversation that we have around diversity, equity, and inclusion, as I celebrate those differences, right? And I use them to funnel it back into the work. How can we continue to do better work? How can we better educate ourselves? How can we learn from each other, grow from each other, and create something that is special, that's new, that's unique, and that is going to help our college move forward. Robin, the instrument that I use to assess our staff, so it is something that our college uses. So it is just a general employee evaluation that we use. It's not anything that I've created. The professional development plan and the AACC guide is what I use to track how we manage professional development, because that is, professional development is handled at a division level. So the way that Ann Johnson, our VPSS, does PD is maybe different than how Gerald Wade, our Vice President of Administrative Services, handles his PD dollars. For my team in particular, it is aligned to those competencies and what they want to learn and grow over the next upcoming year. Thank you for the compliments about the presentation. As someone who is Gen Z, things like PowerPoints and other basic office functions are very simple, but to other generations, the skill is seen as amazing. Because we have this inherent understanding and expertise in simple tech, we're often given this kind of work by default. How do you transcend this in the workplace and show that my knowledge goes beyond just technology? It's a great question. I have a colleague named Latoya who created, as our faculty fellow, this instructional technology certification program. And I would recommend my Gen Zer that you do a training on how to create amazing PowerPoints, and that's it. I mean, right? I mean, one of the things that I'm learning, particularly in this job, is that you've got to be able to teach people how to do the work. So if you know that you can put together a really strong presentation that's recorded and made accessible, that is what I would recommend, so you don't fall into having to do that all the time. Or what I've done is I've worked with our marketing team to build 3 or 4 PowerPoint templates that our college uses. So you need a tight template? Great. We've got 5 that are designed already that you can access. So that's what I would recommend that you do. Thank you for the feedback. Supervise a group of college students for a peer mentoring program. I can see the potential. Hard time motivating them to connect with mentees. I'm remotely reminding them, how can I motivate your team? Yeah, so I'm sure you've done this, but for me, it's often a reminder, like when you're trying to get somebody to, especially when you talk about like mentorship, I think it's always good to hear about how valuable that experience is, right? So I've had people tell me often that I've not done a good enough job. People have not done a good enough job of giving people their flowers while they're here. And how that connects back to your question is, I think that, you know, I've got to do a better job of telling the people that mentored me how powerful that experience was, right? So you know, there's a gentleman, oh, sorry, but all right, Caesar, appreciate that. We're at the hour. I've got maybe one more question to answer, but if you want to talk offline, you've got my email. I'll type it in the chat. But just to wrap up your question, Eddie, I think there's value in reminding them how powerful that mentoring experience is for people, and how that little bit of time that you spend with somebody can have such a huge impact. So I know that Ricky knows that the time that he's spent with me has been valuable, but it's important for me to tell him, hey, look, man, like the conversation that, you know, the advice that you gave me about having a conversation with my wife about where we want to move as a president was amazing, man. It just opened up the door for her and I to have these really insightful conversations. And I think a lot of times we don't do that. So Eddie, I would find a way to help your mentors really, really see the value in their contribution to their mentee. And their mentee may never tell them, hey man, I really appreciate you taking that call the other day because I just need somebody to talk to, just because, you know, they got other things going on. But I think when you bring those moments back to show how a phone call, an email, a text message made the difference for somebody, that oftentimes has nudged me, and I've seen nudge other people to get back active in doing the work they need to do, and back engaging with people that they need to support. So y'all, I think, you know, I've been told that my time is up, and I just really appreciate your time. This is my first time presenting to an audience that I cannot see. So I appreciate you just being engaged and being attentive. I'm going to download and send over, I've sent the link over to the AACC guides, but I'll send them over again in an email. I'm going to grab all your email addresses, send over the PD plan. You've got my email address. So if there's anything that you need, don't hesitate to reach out to me and call me. I'm you know, 100% willing to be support. And I just want to say thank you for all that you all are doing to support our men of color, and the fact that you are here just is a true testament to who you are as human beings and as leaders. And have a great week. And hopefully we will see you tomorrow at the amazing panel that's going to be facilitated um, for you all and our students. All right, I'm gonna copy this chat.